Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time today to attend our continuing education and training program. This webinar is No Particle Left Behind. It will be presented by Delia Downes of Armex. This is unequivocally the largest webinar in our history, and I want to congratulate everyone for taking the time to participate. We have over 95 people taking part today, and they're from 34 countries outside the United States. Okay, at this time I'd like to introduce Delia Downes of Church & Dwight. Ms. Downes has been employed at Church & Dwight, the makers of Arm & Hammer products, since 1985 and is a product manager in the Armex company. Armex is a joint venture between Safety Clean and Church & Dwight. Armex sells a full line of aqueous chemistries exclusively through Safety Clean services, and Armex blast media through a network of independent distributors in North America. Armex is also sold by Church & Dwight through a network of distributors in export markets worldwide. Delia has worked in the Armex group since the product line was first developed in 1990 in various capacities. She now manages marketing, sales, product development, and application research and development. She is a regular contributor to trade publications reporting on the successful use and benefits of soda blasting. Delia's presentation today is No Particle Left Behind, with Armex baking soda-based water-soluble media from the makers of Arm & Hammer products. She will discuss how you can clean, degrease, and depaint engine components in one step with this unique abrasive material without damaging your components. This time, it's all yours, Delia.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you to all our attendees. I first wanted to say that when I was given the date of 9/11, I hesitated due to the tragic anniversary that this day represents. But I realized that the best way to commemorate those that are lost was to continue in our endeavors daily of doing our jobs, producing what we produce, and being as industrious as possible. So I thought that's fine. 9/11 is a great date. It is my objective today to give you a basic understanding of how the simple material sodium bicarbonate, commonly known as baking soda, has been enhanced by the makers of Armex blast media to perform as a heavy-duty cleaner for remanufacturers to tackle some of the most difficult cleaning and surface preparation applications, like heavy grease and oil removal, paint removal, and carbon residue removal. So let's get started. Most webinars end with the question and answer period, but I'd like to pose these questions as those that I will try to answer in this webinar. What is Armex? How does it work? Why is Armex good for remanufacturing? How is it cost effective? And can it work in my facility? What is Armex? Armex is based on the product baking soda. Most of you are familiar with sodium bicarbonate, commonly referred to as baking soda, usually found in your kitchen cabinet or your refrigerator. It's a fine white powder with a very benign nature. It has a fairly base pH of 8.2. It's non-toxic, non-hazardous, non-flammable, non-combustible, non-sparking, water-soluble, and has a Mohs hardness of only 0.5. We've taken this wonderfully natural particulate and enhanced it for performance as a cleaning and coating removal abrasive, being used in either a compressed air or a water delivery system. So Armex is baking soda. It's chemically very similar to the product that you find in the little yellow box, Arm & Hammer baking soda, in a supermarket. But because we are relying on its physical properties, more so than its chemical properties, we have a tighter specification on particle size distribution, and we've added other ingredients to optimize its natural properties for specific applications. All of our products have flow aids and moisture control aids. This minimizes any issues you would have with moisture during blasting. One flow aid makes the bicarbonate 2 times more resistant to moisture than regular baking soda, and the other makes it 8 times more resistant. We add other ingredients to improve rinsability and grease cutting. Our profile and turbine formulas are blended with a hard grit at 10%. This gives the abrasive just a little bit of tooth, but not to the point where you will see damage or distortion on the base material. Oops. Sorry about that. The primary products of choice for the remanufacturers are Armex Maintenance XL product. This is a 270 micron or 70 grit abrasive with a hydrophilic flow aid, making it 2 times more resistant to moisture than regular baking soda. It's excellent for general cleaning and heavier paint removal. The Armex Maintenance formula is very much the same, except it's a slightly smaller particle, about 170 microns or 100 grit, and is best used on more gentle, sensitive substrates with thinner coatings. The Armex turbine formula is a real departure from the rest of our formulations because it is blended with 10% aluminum oxide. It is a very, very fine grit, 70 microns or 220 grit, and it is excellent for removing heavy carbon residues and for exposing some white metal without surface damage. The hard abrasive allows for the deeper clean, but because it's only 10%, the soda actually cushions its impact, preserving the base metal, but still getting it very clean. So now we've established that Armex is baking soda based, and as you can see here, in comparison to other abrasives, it is softer than most other grits available, and it is softer than most materials it would be used on. How does it work? It is very soft, as we've established, and extremely friable, meaning that upon impact, it fractures into many more tiny particles. It is pulverized by the impact on the surface. 2 phenomena result. The energy that is generated at this point is really the force that is removing the coating or contaminant, and then the particle is rendered to dust. This is one of the primary differences between Armex and other grits. Even grits considered friable like glass or plastic remain intact unless you're operating at pressures over 45 psi. We'll touch on that again later. Only then do they begin to fracture. Armex, on the other hand, fractures at even the lowest pressures, 5 or 10 psi. This is the key attribute that preserves the base material. In order to demonstrate the difference, let's take a look at this animation. The hard abrasive remains intact, strikes the surface, and removes the material, and may also remove the coating, and may also remove part of the base material. This might be as little as a scrape or a peen, but it could be as much as a pip. Armex, on the other hand, fractures upon impact, releasing all the energy, which removes the coating or contamination and leaves no damage to the base material. Of course, there are some places where this would be a disadvantage. If you have very heavy rust removal requirements, or you need to create a deep surface profile, Armex would not be the best abrasive of choice. If you have many smaller or low value parts that can be cleaned in a batch process or a chemical bath, or if you have complex automation requirements, Armex may be difficult to adapt. It is a line-of-sight operation, So automation requires the use of multiple nozzles or moving nozzles, and certain geometries do not lend themselves well to that type of automation. Lastly, if you have no environmental concerns, but that of course would be the exception to the rule, especially in North America and somewhat globally at this point. Why is Armex good for remanufacturing? There are three primary reasons why Armex is good for use in remanufacturing. Substrate preservation, which we've already mentioned, no particle ingression, and the elimination of steps. We'll cover each of these. While I know none of you are stripping pop cans or light bulbs, these photos do demonstrate how gentle yet effective Armex can be on sensitive substrates. This is becoming more and more important for engine remanufacturers as more and more components are being made from lighter materials, aluminum being just one. As you can see here, Armex provides a very clean, bright, like new finish. We have the before, the same part cleaned with glass beads, and then Armex Maintenance XL used to clean. There is a slight difference, but as you can see, it is a much brighter finish, and it is a like new surface. As a remanufacturer, you want parts that look like new. One of our end users, Kevin Anderson, stated, "It's getting so we can't tell our newly casted parts from the parts cleaned with Armex." That's how new it looks. Here's another example of steel crowns and aluminum pistons. The second reason that Armex is good for remanufacturers is that it's water soluble. I'm sorry. It is, there's no particle ingression and it's water soluble. We've already demonstrated how it is rendered to dust, but this dust is water soluble. So when you rinse the surface of a particular part, all of the material and residues that are left in, regardless of contours and passageways, will be rinsed thoroughly through. This is also very important for NDT prep work. Look at these results. This complex part is cleaned and thoroughly rinsed without having to worry about particles being lodged in the various ports and passageways. This particular piece was cleaned using a slurry blast system, and the entire piece only took 30 minutes. This piece was cleaned in a dry blast system, was able to remove both gasketing material and surface contamination, leaving all of the ports pristine clean. The third reason you use Armex for remanufacturing and the benefit is that it can eliminate steps. If your process usually requires a pre-wash to remove contaminants before you move on to your abrasive step, you have to ask yourself why. Usually your pre-wash is to clean up the piece of it so you're not fouling your media. After all, you want to get as many turns out of a recyclable grit as you can. So you want to begin with something fairly clean. This usually adds a step, time, and chemical costs, not to mention disposal of those chemicals. In some cases, different processes are used to remove certain coatings or contaminants. So you might have one for grease and oil, one for carbon and paint, one for rust. Armex handles all of these contaminants in one step. You get the job done quickly with better results. Let's look at an example. This turbo impeller required a white metal finish. The previous method was to manually clean and scrape it, then put it through a chemical wash, and then finally into an abrasive blast. Armex, on the other hand, was able to handle this entire process in one step using the turbine formula. It took 3 minutes at 60 psi with 1 pound of material. One and done. So, to review, Armex is baking soda based. It is benign, non-hazardous, non-toxic abrasive, with benefits to the process, the workers, and the environment, requiring minimal waste handling. Most waste is usually classified as a non-haz industrial waste and could be sent to a sanitary landfill. The value-added ingredients improve Armex's performance and are application-specific. All the products include a flow and moisture resistance, and others improve grease, oil, and carbon removal. Its soft and friable nature, so there is no damage to the base material, protecting machine tolerances, screw threads, foundry stampings, and original profiles. Also, this feature makes an excellent tool for NDT testing in that it causes no pitting, peening, or crack closure. And finally, its water solubility allows for complete and thorough rinsing, so there is no particle ingression issues, no particulate left behind, that can cause performance or warranty issues, or that require rigorous post-inspection and particulate removal steps. How is it cost effective? One of the most misunderstood attributes of baking soda blasting is that it is a one-pass medium. It fractures so completely at any pressure from 10 psi to 110 psi that it cannot be recycled. So the question arises, how can it be cost effective? Most systems engineered to run soda operate efficiently with a very low flow of material, usually between a half a pound to a pound a minute. So minimal consumption is important, not only to operational costs, but also to performance. Each particle needs to do its job. That said, if you have a very tenacious soil and need to increase pressures in order to deal with it more aggressively, you're not at risk of losing your recyclability, nor are you at risk of increasing damage. You can get the job done faster and better. With recyclable media, particularly glass or plastic, consumption is usually higher. And though you have the benefit of recycling, this benefit is lost when you operate at pressures over 45 psi. In the same scenario, with a more tenacious soil, you may be forced to dwell longer to maintain recyclability, which increases both your material and your labor costs and increases production time. If you choose to increase pressures, production may increase, but you lose the recycling factor, subsequently increasing your material costs. Because glass and plastic and other goods are harder than soda, you also increase the risk of damage with increased pressure. So to recap on the benefits of a one-pass media, if you look at glass and plastic, which are harder, with hardnesses of 3 and above, they are recyclable up to 45 psi. They do require a pre-cleaning step. They also run the risk of reintroducing contamination due to being recycled and driving some of that contamination deeper into surfaces. With increased pressures for increased production, you lose or decrease recyclability, and you also increase the risk of damage. These cost time and money, and they do require operator expertise. Armex, on the other hand, because it's so soft, you are forced to use clean material with every pass. Therefore, there is no pre-cleaning step and no chemicals required for that pre-cleaning step. And you have no risk of recontamination. When you increase pressures for increased production, you're not losing recyclability because you never had it, and you are still at minimal risk for damage. You can be very aggressive on the soil and get a deeper clean faster. All of this saves time, money, and the process is operator friendly. The water solubility is part of this. When you look at plastic and glass, you are at risk of particle ingression. That requires often a pre-step where you use barriers like tape or douse to prevent particles from ingressing into sensitive areas. You still run the risk of entrapment, and you have to have a rigorous post-inspection step to be sure that no particles have been trapped in critical areas. With regards to NDT testing, harder abrasives do cause pitting, peening at worst, and crack closure. All of these require time, cost, and operator expertise to manage. The Armex glass media, on the other hand, is water soluble. All the particulate is eliminated with a water rinse. Even the particulate of the product, the turbine formula, that is at 10% 220 grit aluminum oxide, has been found to flush completely out of systems due to the fact that 90% of the material is water soluble. When this is flushed out, the fine particulate at 10% is dragged along with it. With regard to NDT testing, there's no pitting, peening, risk, and no crack closure. All of this saves your operator time, money, and it's operator friendly. There are other benefits as well to using Armex because of its benign and water-soluble nature. You can use it in both wet and dry systems. Your waste can be either a dry waste or a liquid waste. If you leave a residue of the material on steel surfaces due to its neutral pH, it will act as a natural rust inhibitor before you move on to your next step. Often, because of the benign nature of baking soda, your waste will test out as non-haz industrial waste and can be easily packaged for disposal at a sanitary landfill. The other interesting benefit is if facilities have their own wastewater treatment, Armex can act as a buffer in on-site wastewater treatment processes. So you can save on your buffering chemicals. Jasper Engines is one of the largest single consumers of Armex for engine component part cleaning. This is taken directly from Jasper Engines' website on green initiatives. Ozone depleting vapors have been reduced 77% by changing our cleaning process. Coal slag or Armex blasting agents have taken the place of many solvents used by our company during the core cleaning process. Armex is user-friendly, environmentally friendly, economical, and effective. To give an example further of its cost effectiveness, we look at some actual end user results. This particular customer began using Armex way back in 1997, one of our first entrances into the remanufacturing market segment. They originally had a process that was 13 to 15 steps. We were able to reduce that to 8 steps. And as a result, they not only reduced their costs for labor, utilities, and chemicals, but they were also able to improve their throughput. Another core cleaning customer began using Armex this past year and has improved their throughput because of the predictable nature of their clean. Previously, they had a 4-step process, which was reduced to a 2-step process. The time to clean using washing, high-pressure washing and hand grinding had a lot of variability. Sometimes it'd take 10 minutes to 45 minutes. With Armex, the results were far more predictable for a 15-20-minute turnaround. Therefore, they were able to increase their throughput. The other thing they noticed was that they also improved their paint cure rate from 1.5 hours to 45 minutes. This phenomenon is being investigated further, but we believe it is due to the intense level of clean achieved before the paint application, and that there was no change to the original profile. So there were not deeper valleys and peaks which would prolong the cure rate. This customer was so convinced of their ROI that they purchased 2 additional machines shortly after they installed their first. Another end user began using this process back in '98, and in 2006 they switched to the turbine formula. That is the formula that, once again, we spoke about that has the aluminum oxide in it. Their sediment tests show that there's absolutely no residue remaining. The other element to be considered with the cost of change is what your operators are going to think. And one of our end users remarked, "This one is easy. The operators really drove the change. After our visit to the distributor for the demo, we put the equipment in place and the operators ran with the changes and the improvements." So now that you've seen how it works, why it works well for remanufacturing, you may ask, can it work in my facility or for what I do? If you are involved in any of these industries for remanufacturing, and I'm sure you are, then Armex can work for you. Armex is being used to clean and prep many of these components, primarily the ones in black ink here. So if you're doing anything like this, you could effectively use the Armex glass ink. Here's an example of a diesel engine pump head, housing covers, and a valve stem cleaned with 100% soil removal in as little as 32 seconds to 3.10 minutes using the Armex maintenance formula. Again, that is the mid-range formula, which is about 100 grit. These are some samples of parts we've done in our lab for a customer. On the left, the grease and paint was removed from the first piece. In the after photo, you can see that there's some residue on the surface. We've left this because it will inhibit flash rust while the part is transported back to the customer. All they need to do at that point is water rinse it, dry it, and then move on to the remaining step in the process. The turbine formula that was used on the right gives just enough tooth to eliminate staining on the surface of this part. It's 90% water soluble, and so when it is rinsed, most of the material is water soluble and the remainder is dragged out with the rinse. Here's another example of a before and after with the residue left on to prevent flash rust. So these are the items that can be cleaned using Armex. What is the equipment required? It's often asked if Armex can be used in existing equipment. The best answer for that is no. Recycling abrasive systems have some disadvantage in using Armex because Armex is not recyclable. One of the requirements for glassing with soda is certainly a unique pressurized delivery system made to deliver soda with minimal flow rates, as we mentioned, from a half a pound to a pound a minute. The other is to have improved airflow through the cabinet box and improved visibility through the windshield to examine the workpiece. Conventional systems do end up getting too clogged with dust for the operator to see adequately. Many of the soda glass systems have airflow across this windshield to improve visibility. The other item is the recycling. Because Armex is not recyclable, in recycling cabinets, it would bypass the cyclone and go directly to the dust collector, causing the dust collector to clog prematurely. With the Armex systems, the cyclone disposes of 95 to 99% of the waste and particulate and drops it into a container for disposal. In this case, it's a drum. It can be a bag or a tray, depending on the size and the throughput of the system. And lastly, you would have your dust collector for the very fine particulate. So there are some slight changes. With conventional blast equipment for recycling media, you would run into issues with performance. And while conventional systems will probably still be used, you'll still probably want to use glass or plastic for some operations. We suggest that you get a dedicated system for soda. This way you do not cause any cross-contamination and you have a dedicated system to handle your disposable abrasive. We sell through a network of distributors in North America and worldwide. All of our distributors are well versed in the equipment options that are out there. They will work with you to determine which option is best for your application, for your budget, and for the space allotted for the equipment. On the right here is a dry glass cabinet by Clemco called the Bicarbonator. This is just one example of a contained glass cabinet. On the right is a partial room that can be built modularly to any depth or width, or you can have a fully contained room. Most of the distributors can advise you on what would work for your application. Another option is a slurry blast cabinet. This cabinet is manufactured by Wet Technologies. The interesting thing about using Armex in a slurry blast cabinet is that you will be able to get a few turns of material, perhaps 2 to 3 turns. So there is some minimal recyclability when using the slurry glass cabinet. Whether you go wet or dry will depend on what your result requirements are. Again, here is a before and after of an engine using turbine formula, and commented by Chris McGinnis, who says, you just can't hand detail and get as clean as you can with soda. So if you're looking for a product that can help you produce a like new part in your remanufacturing, Armex may be the answer for you. I hope this presentation has given you an understanding of how baking soda glassing can work in your facility and some of the benefits, and that I've answered these questions. What is Armex? How does it work? Why is it good for remanufacturing? How cost effective is it, and can it work in my facility? If anyone has any other questions at this point, I would be happy to hear them. Thank you for attending, and thank you, Joe and PRA, for giving us this opportunity to showcase Armex.
Thank you, Delia. A couple questions and comment. One is that we have recorded this session, and it will be available for download. It's way too big to email, so it will be available for download. If we have your email address, then I can send that link to anyone who would like to request it. You can request it through PERA from our website on the contact page. First question we have for you, Delia, is what are the applications of Armex in the petrochemical, chemical, and food and beverage industries?
Well, that's quite a departure from remanufacturing.
It is.
But Armex is used in a broad range of industries, and for the same reason. It can effectively remove coatings without damaging or changing surface material. Because it's non-combustible, non-flaming, and non-sparking, it is excellent for use in volatile environments like petrochemical and chemical. It also doesn't complicate the waste disposal. With regards to food, it is baking soda based, it is a food grade material, and all of the formulas are USDA approved as A1 cleaners for food processing facilities. Food processing facilities often have aluminum, stainless steel, neoprene, very sensitive substrates, which require a deep level of clean, and Armex is very effective.
Very good. Next question. Question is, Delia, what about stripping and cleaning aluminum wheels?
Yes, that's an excellent application. The aluminum wheels, we have a number of different end users who use Armex for that purpose. That's for rework or for remanufacture. It would be the same thing, and oftentimes you can automate a process like that because you're basically dealing with prefixed geometries.
Okay, here's a real interesting question for you, Delia. I am using dry blasting at the moment. What applications do I have in building and construction of houses with concrete and 3 layers of plasters?
Wow. Again, quite different from remanufacturing. You can certainly go to our website and pose some of those questions at armex.com, and we can refer you to a distributor to help you test out those applications. But Armex is used extensively for cleaning and surface prep of masonry and other structural materials. When it comes to plaster, it certainly can be used on stuccos and things like that, but you need to be sure that your plaster has enough integrity to withstand the blast pressures.
Okay, next question is, when dry blasting, what is the maximum length of the blast hose recommended and why?
Well, usually most systems conventionally come with about 50 feet of blast hose. You are going to lose some pressure over the length of a hose. With soda blasting, you might lose 1 to 2 psi per 50 feet. We do recommend that rather than push media, that you push air. So if you do need to reach a distant workpiece, it's best to extend the hose from your air compressor to your delivery system and use the shortest amount of hose from your delivery system to the workpiece.
Okay, one more question. Can we buy direct from the manufacturer? And I'm not sure if that is referring to equipment or to the media itself. So why don't you address both?
Armex is sold through a network of distributors. Our distributors are well versed in a myriad of equipment options and the many formulas that Armex has available. They can work with you to match the equipment and the material to the application that you have, as well as to your budget and if you're getting cabinet systems to the space available in your facility. We do not sell direct. It's my understanding that most equipment manufacturers do not sell direct either, because the distributor gives you a unique contact point for technical support, parts replacement, and the source of the consumable. So it's really best to work through the distributor. If you want an Armex distributor, you can go to our website, www.armex.com, go to the distributor locator tab, enter the information, and we will respond with the distributor closest to you in your area.
Okay, what about nozzle wear? Do you see a lot of nozzle wear, and how is that handled?
Interestingly, with Armex, if you have another reason to have a dedicated system for soda blasting is that you get very little wear on parts. Because it's non-destructive to the surface, as we saw in the webinar and presented a few different times, how there is no substrate damage. Likewise, there is no or very little nozzle wear and valve wear in any of your equipment options.
Okay. Got another question here on it's a little bit different. On wood, which is the right recipe? The questioner has found a lot of wood with marine-like paint, and it's killing him. What can you do for him?
I'm not sure if marine-like paint, is that what it says?
That's what he's saying, marine-like paint.
Okay. Well, wood is a very soft base material. There are a couple of concerns there. Number one is if your coating is harder than your base material, you are going to run into some issues because you're going to have to be more aggressive on the coating than you would on that base material. And as you get closer to the base material, you could do some damage. Number two, mostly Armex can be used even on framing, house framing, pine. So even very soft woods, if you lower your pressure and work very carefully, you can remove coatings. You may reduce the very soft grain, leaving the hard grain raised a bit, but that can be evened out afterwards with sanding. And with hardwoods, oaks and mahoganies, you're not going to run into that problem. As long as you maintain a low pressure, you can work very easily on wood surfaces.
Okay, next up. It says, can you tell me how much I must calculate extra if I would blast with Armex compared to Korund? It's spelled K-O-R-U-N-D. I'm not familiar with that. It says, in other words, how much is the price per ton?
Once again, I don't have pricing. Our products are sold through our network of distributor. The important thing when comparing processes, and I was hoping that was clear in the webinar, is that you cannot simply compare the cost of performance of just the abrasive blasting part of a process. The cost of Armex must be assessed in relation to the entire job. In the case of remanufacturing, we saw the elimination of many steps. Even if the abrasive was to cost a little bit more per pound than another abrasive, you would make up that cost with the elimination of steps, the increase in throughput, the decrease in hazardous waste or chemical waste disposal. So the entire process must be evaluated for cost efficiencies.
Very good. Let me run through questions once more, and I think that covers everything that everybody has asked. One more. Delia, can you tell me how to contact your technical representatives for consultations?
Once again, I would suggest that you go to our website, either go through the Contact Us page or go through the distributor locator page, and in the application section, you can explain your concern or your question. You can also reach us at 800-332-5424. 800-332-5424. We have a full test facility at our headquarters in Princeton, New Jersey, where we will take parts in, we will do a complete study on them, photograph, and return to you a comprehensive report on an assessment and evaluation of the process, which formulation to use, nozzles, pressure, dwell time, etc. And that is free of charge service.
Is that something they need to get permission to send a sample in, or and where do they send that sample, Delia?
Usually, again, you work with your distributor. We do request a evaluation form be completed so that we fully understand your objectives, what it is you're trying to improve, whether it's eliminating manual cleaning or eliminating chemicals, or it's a brand new process and you don't have a cleaning or maintenance tool available. We want to be able to design the test to meet your requirements and your objectives.
And is there a cost on the report and the results, Delia?
No, there's none.
Okay. Okay, can Armex be used to clean heat exchanger tubes, and what delivery system can be used for that?
Armex is excellent for cleaning heat exchanger tubes, fin fan, cooler systems. Depending on the system itself, you may need an adjustment to the nozzle. You might need a lance, an extension, but basic portable equipment can be used for that application.
Okay, and I'm not sure you can answer this question, or online, but what is the criteria to become a distributor in a country where there currently is no distributor?
Once again, once we go worldwide, we do have strategically located distributors. They may cover a couple of different countries. We assess that as needed. If that is something you're interested in, again, fill out the form and state your objective is to become a distributor in your country.
Fabulous. I believe that's all of the questions that I have listed. At this time, I would like to thank everyone for their attendance. Again, the session has been recorded. If you'd like a copy, you can contact me at Joe Polich, that's P as in Peter, O-L-I-C-H, at pera.org, or you can go to our website, pera.org, and go to the contact page, and you can get my email and phone number from there. and I will make sure you get the link for downloading this. Again, thanks again for all your time, and Delia, special thanks to you. A special thanks to Sarah Grimm of Rottler for her presentation. And that concludes our webinar for today. Have a terrific day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, everyone.